I never expected a routine community board meeting would spiral into a showdown worthy of a Hollywood thriller, but that morning, under the blistering sun, I stepped into Rosewood Estates with a file folder in hand and a calm resolve in my chest, only to find Karen Mulberry, our notorious HOA president, flanked by two uniformed imposters brandishing badges that glinted in the glare of the security lights. As if daring anyone to question their authority, I approached the clubroom doors expecting polite hellos, but found Karen's lips curled into a sneer as she slammed the door shut behind her two hired thugs. The heavy thud reverberated through the hallway like a judge's gavel signaling a trial with only one predetermined verdict: intimidation. Everyone in Rosewood knew Karen's reputation for petty fines and power plays, but this time she'd crossed a line so thick it felt like granite. Her fake cops blocked my path and ordered me to hand over my credentials, insisting this private enclave brook no uninvited scrutiny. I reached into my coat and produced the genuine Department of Homeland Security IDA flash of silver and blue that momentarily stunned her accomplices, who whispered urgent questions into the walkie-talkies dangling from their belts. It was the first shockwave of shame rolling across Karen's face. The sneer faltered as I quietly reminded her that I wasn't just any resident investigating a neighbor dispute. I was a federal agent on a justified mission to probe allegations of HOA corruption spanning multiple states far beyond the picket fences of Rosewood Estates. Karen's eyes darted to the cameras I'd installed under my badge, standard issue for undercover ops, capturing every guilty twitch and forced smile. Her imposters exchanged nervous glances caught between their paycheck and their rising panic. I pressed on, explaining I had evidence she'd laundered HOA dues through shell corporations, funneled funds into private accounts, and manipulated bylaw loopholes to enrich herself while residents suffered sky-high maintenance fees. But Karen, ever the stage queen, refused to bow. She raised her chin and proclaimed her counsel had sworn those funds were allocated legally, though her voice cracked like a cheap microphone echo in an empty theater. Then came the twist that jolted everyone like an earthquake. The amiable senior board member I thought was on my side, Miriam Green, stepped forward holding an envelope stuffed with signed affidavits and bank records. Miriam's gentle smile was gone, replaced by a warrior's glare as she recounted late-night phone calls from fearful residents detailing threats, property defacement, and wrongful towing orchestrated by Karen's minions to silence dissent. Miriam handed me a flash drive containing surveillance footage of Karen burrowing through homeowners' mailboxes at midnight, stealing signatures to override election ballots. The room's tension snapped like fraying rope as Karen realized her secret empire was unraveling. Miriam's revelation ignited a crescendo of outrage among the gathered crowd. Clenched fists pounded tables and voices rose in a unified chant demanding Karen's removal and full accountability. That was the moment Karen's imperious mask finally shattered. The next scene played out in slow motion as her two fake cops fumbled for excuses, then bolted through the side door, abandoning their leader to face the fury of a community betrayed. Karen's face went pale, her makeup smeared by tears of fury and fear. She stammered for control, but the gavel fell an audible click as the HOA bylaws invoked an immediate vote of no confidence. Her phone buzzed frantically with calls from legal counsel and shell company partners begging for a lifeline, but there was none to be thrown. Karen's empire crumbled in an avalanche of evidence and collective willpower. Months of resentment boiled over into an instant reckoning. She was escorted from the building by real law enforcement agents summoned by my call earlier, agents who recognized my credentials and cordoned off the premises to secure financial records and digital logs as Karen wailed about betrayal and conspiracies. Now, as the community gathers to rebuild trust and rewrite bylaws with transparency at their core, Rosewood stands as a testament to the power one person can wield when armed with integrity and truth. And if you witness this dramatic fall from grace, or have your own story of standing up to abuse of power, share your thoughts. What would you have done differently? And where do you draw the line between authority and entitlement? The aftermath of Karen's dramatic unmasking rippled through Rosewood Estates like a tidal wave of relief and vindication as neighbors, once silenced by fear and fines, rallied to reclaim their community's soul. In the days following her ousting, lessons emerged from every cracked facade and overgrown hedge. From the moment real law enforcement swept Karen's cronies away, I stayed on the periphery, badge tucked safely, watching shock transform into solidarity. Garden clubs met in the pavilion under strings of fairy lights repurposed to celebrate transparency rather than tinsel for taxes. Committees formed with bylaws rewritten to bar future tyrants and mandate third-party audits of every cent collected. No longer would residents whisper about phantom towing or graffiti threats at night. Instead, they swapped stories over lemonade about how they'd once trembled at Karen's phone calls demanding thousands in emergency assessments for imaginary repairs. Now laughter filled the air as former Neighbors turned activists compared notes on how they'd secretly banded together pooling funds to contest the false fines. Even before I arrived on the scene, the most surprising change was the spirit of mentorship that sprouted among the residents. New leaders emerged in unlikely forms. Elena Morales, the HOA's previous secretary who'd quietly endured Karen's tirades, stood at a podium reading aloud the newly ratified mission statement, emphasizing equity, kindness, and community service. She spoke of neighbors' shared history, soft block parties, holiday potlucks, and lending a cup of sugar across fences, and how those memories would guide the reinvention of Rosewood's future. Meanwhile, I coordinated with federal agents to oversee the forensic audit of Karen's digital footprint and shell accounts. Day after day, I waded through spreadsheets of transactions, payments funneled through front companies tied to Karen's fiancé's landscaping business, inflated invoices for landscape architecture, and untraceable cash withdrawals that lined her pockets. As the evidence piled up, so did the community's resolve to press charges to the fullest extent, to ensure Karen's downfall served as a bulletproof deterrent against any future menace hiding behind an HOA letterhead. Yet amidst the forensic coldness of numbers, I was reminded over and over again of the human cost of her reign. I visited the home of Grace Thompson, whose driveway had been towed in the dead of night when she refused to pay a surprise detention fee. Grace, a retired teacher with silver hair and gentle eyes, recounted how she'd prayed the next morning that her car would still be there or at least returned without added penalties. It wasn't she'd paid Karen's fake cops hundreds of dollars in release fees before finally calling family for a ride to church. Watching Grace clutch my arm in gratitude when I handed her the reimbursement check was a moment that grounded the entire operation in purpose beyond politics or prestige. It was about protecting ordinary lives from petty despots. As the Commission for Community Healing convened, one proposal resonated above all: creating a truth garden, where every resident could plant a native tree inscribed with stories of resiliency, standing up, speaking out, and refusing to be silenced. The garden's centerpiece would be the old wooden sign I'd erected at the scene that day: Justice Exposed, now varnished and encased in protective glass, symbolizing the power of truth to unearth corruption. Volunteers including Miriam Green and Elena Morales spent weekends tilling the earth, handing out shovels and seedlings to families who once dashed past the gates in secret, now strolling arm in arm under a sky of collaboration. Karen's fall also prompted introspection beyond Rosewood's borders as nearby associations caught wind of the scandal and scrambled to review their own practices. Several HOAs reached out to our task force requesting guidance on bylaw overhaul and how to detect early warning signs of fraud. I found myself hosting webinars on identifying shell corporations, reading balance sheets, and empowering residents with legal literacy. In those sessions, I emphasized one simple truth: accountability is a collective act requiring vigilance, courage, and the willingness to demand answers no matter how uncomfortable. Back in Rosewood, as autumn painted the trees in fiery hues, I attended the founding ceremony for the community's new Oversight Council. Seated beside me were elderly veterans, single parents, and young activists who discovered surprising talents for negotiation and policy drafting under duress. Together they had drafted a charter that enshrined resident votes on all major expenditures, a 3-strikes policy for any board member facing credible misconduct claims, and a rotating chair system to prevent power consolidation. When the first vote to adopt the charter passed with unanimous applause, I caught sight of Karen Mulberry, now escorted through the gates by federal marshals into a convoy of black SUV, mouth twisted in silent outrage as she realized her neighbors had reclaimed their home without her approval. In the weeks that followed, court filings multiplied. Charges of mail tampering, impersonation of law enforcement, embezzlement, and racketeering all bore Karen's name as lead defendant. News crews staked out the courthouse, and I spotted Miriam attending hearings alongside true neighbors who once trembled at Karen's threats. Their bold testimony, laced with authenticity and tears, transformed headlines from scandalous gossip into a clarion call for communities everywhere to defend democracy at the most local level. Despite the legal fray, Rosewood's spirit stayed intact. Fundraisers were organized to offset legal costs for residents wrongly fined, educational workshops taught children about civic duty, and neighborhood watch groups formed to report suspicious board activities rather than cower. The Truth Garden flourished under the care of volunteers, its saplings growing tall as symbols of hope and renewal. My own mission drew to a close when the U.S. Attorney's Office announced an 8-count indictment against Karen Mulberry. As I handed off the final files, I felt a pang of bittersweet pride in a job well done, tempered by the reminder of how power, when left unchecked, can warp even the fabric of everyday life. Before departing Rosewood Estates, I walked the winding brick path through the garden, pausing at each tree plaque. A dozen residents, mothers, retirees, students had inscribed messages like, "I spoke truth, fear ends here," or "We are Rosewood." Under the waning afternoon sun, their words glowed with meaning far deeper than any HOA notice. I tipped my hat to the sign "Justice Exposed" and tucked my badge back into its folder, satisfied that the most potent weapon against entitlement is community itself. As the gates closed behind me and I drove away, engines humming, I left behind not just a neighborhood freed from one woman's greed, but a blueprint for empowerment carved into every blade of grass. And now, having witnessed how ordinary people can topple an empire built on fear, I invite you: what line would you never let a tyrant cross in your own backyard? And when have you stood up to reclaim your power? Share your stories of courage and conviction, because in every shared experience lies the spark that can light a revolution of accountability and justice.